This is The Back Pass, a podcast for sports nerds by sports nerds.
Welcome to The Back Pass. My name is Ali Mulwala, and tonight we're going to talk coaches and coaching, and what makes a coach, and who hires a coach, and why do they get hired. Hello and welcome to The Back Pass. My name is Ali Mulwala, and today I am joined by the one and lonely Kevin. It is just going to be the two of us, Kevin.
Yeah, it's going to be it's a date, isn't it? Like it's just one-on-one session, right?
Do you have a candle handy? Like, should we get a candle?
Yeah, we're pretty close to Valentine's Day, so it could be the Valentine's edition of the Back Pass.
The Back Pass Duet Edition. The one-on-one. Let's talk coaches. So some crazy coaching news, obviously, in the last few weeks. There have been 2 sackings in the English Premier League, Frank Lampard at Everton, and now Jesse Marsch at Leeds. And they both only had the job for a year. What happened? And along with this as well, just with these two, there's also the tie-in with what the hell is going on at Southampton. And are they the next one as well? Because they're probably on that list.
Yeah. So let's start with the latest sacking. There's so many terms for it. I think Jesse Marsch, I think that was a little bit unwarranted. It's difficult for you to have the expectation that you're going to have the, Ten Hag, Pep, Arteta effect straight away. That's unreasonable for a mid-table club. It's not easy to change a culture in a club, in any club. And I don't think it sets the right, like, especially for these kinds of, like, you look at for instance Brentford or Brighton, who are the mid-table clubs that most clubs should model themselves against. They have a particular strategy, and that's from top down, and they hire their coaches in that same strategy. It kind of feels like both of these clubs are just running around like headless chickens, making knee-jerk reactions, not really considering the long-term plan and how it fits into that plan and really playing things out. That's just personal opinion. Somebody looking from the outside. Well,
Kevin, I know you mentioned Mikel Arteta, and I just want to remind all our Arsenal fans and Arsenal listeners that Mikel Arteta took over a mid-table club, right?
Exactly.
Arsenal were firmly in the mid-table. And even when he did take over, they finished 8th 3 years in a row. Or around about, they finished 8th a couple of years in a row there under Mikel Arteta, when Mikel Arteta was still coach. They got close to Champions League, then fell off. And, they've been that mid-table team. And now the patience and the signings that have kind of, bringing in the style have kind of worked out. And now he can actually demonstrate his coaching because he's had a few years to work through some of the things with some of the players or bring in the right guys. Jesse Marsch obviously hasn't been given that time. But to be honest, were we surprised once Leeds fired Marco Bielsa that it was just not good? It was always going to be a shit show after Bielsa.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean, right? Like, it's top down. It's not a coach. You can't blame Jesse Marsch in that situation. But I mean, and I think this is where we probably need to put the separator in. I think Marsch is a good coach given the right environment and structure. I think Lampard is not a good coach regardless of the structure. And that may be harsh, but we've had 2 stints now. First with Chelsea, which should be a top of the table team. And he was given time, if rumblings are correct with Potter and the fan unrest continues, then I think Potter will have a shorter stint than Lampard. But and I don't think that's reasonable because Potter's a proven coach in the league, and Lampard isn't. So there's no way that Lampard should have the same tenure. It doesn't make any sense.
Tuchel took the same exact squad that Lampard had, and midway through a season, and took them to the Champions League and won them the Champions League, right? Yeah. So the players definitely had it in them.
I think Lampard probably should go back to Derby County football and coach there for a while and develop his skill set. I think overall, I'm a bit hesitant when ex-players, especially famous ex-players, become coaches. It ends up. We spoke before the pod about Ruud van Nistelrooy. I think Ruud's probably the exception. Most end up in the back end of the table, or they'll have one good season where everybody's shouting their name from the rooftops, and then the following season they'll just crash and burn because they can't maintain it. We've had Villa, we've Everton. So I think those are failed experiments, and we probably need to look at a little bit more experience before we bring these guys through.
Yeah. I think, Steven Gerrard did win a league title in Scotland.
Yeah, that's true.
And then we had Ole Gunnar, who's won a couple of league titles in Norway before Manchester United. Frank Lampard, did he actually win the league title with Derby? Did they finish top of the championship?
That is a good question. I don't believe so, but I'll check.
And then, there's also Wayne Rooney, who's out there managing.
I thought he was managing his under sixes. No, he's in the States, right? Same thing.
Yeah, he's at DC United.
Yeah. Look, I think it's interesting. I think there's certain types of players who have the capacity to, it's not this tactical side of it. Well, a tactical side is also important, but the EQ component that Alex Ferguson had that allows a player and a coach to connect at some level so that they have their understanding. I don't think players that become coaches have enough time to develop that skill set. And I think that's what separates great coaches from very average coaches within the league. It's not just, and I'm not just talking about football. I think the same is true for rugby league. If you look at some of the coaches that have come through, you always hear about the great examples, right? But I think it takes time for them to build their craft. And I think Gus Gould was the guy who said this. I remember him talking about this a while back, that we don't give coaches enough time to develop their skill set. And I think the Premier League's too high of a league for them to develop their skill set.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think there's too much at stake in the Premier League for them to really, for a young manager, really, you need to hone that craft at the lower leagues and to, at a club that's going to back you, really. And it's interesting you mention that, honing of the skill. Is that also that was something that you saw that was similar? That was a kind of a pattern in the NFL, right?
Yeah. It's interesting in the NFL because there are players who do become coaches, but it's players who have a lot shorter careers, not really the ones that have the longer careers. Ironically, there are some players who do have longer careers in the NFL who do become successful coaches, but they're rare. More often than not, you see the QB coach or a linebackers coach that ends up as defensive coordinator or defensive coordinator within the NFL in a particular team. And with the way that the NFL is heading, there's a lot of offensive coordinators that become head coaches. And so therefore you see ex-QBs or backup QBs who have played in the league for a long period of time becoming head coaches. And that was actually it's a very common channel of path from coaching, where you start off as a backup QB, you become the QB's coach, and then from the QB's coach you may go into like a pass game specialist or something like that, to offensive coordinator, and then become the head coach. So
So, Kevin, tell me, like, NFL, you have like 52 players in a squad. Is the coaching team also then just like 11 players? Is it just a football team to coach an NFL team? Is that what it takes?
I can run through all the different. It depends on the squad, because some, like if you're in the New England Patriots, they have notoriously less amount of coaches than they probably should have, and they don't pay them as much. But
why?
I reckon it's because Bill doesn't want to have coaches who are coaching for money. He wants coaches who have passion for the game, right?
Is he cutting his own paycheck? Like, is he reducing his own paycheck?
I actually don't think he takes that much money. I've seen his kitchen before. It's not that big. He drafted in his kitchen. In his kitchen one year, and I swear to God, there is a still of his dog sitting in front of the computer while he's obviously gone and done something else in the middle of a draft. It's a bit of a meme that's floating around the internet.
So he just has like what he just has like a pile of cash like stuffed in a wall somewhere. Then
I think it could be a tactic. I don't know. Maybe it's the Warren Buffett sort of situation where, yes, I have a lot of money, but I'm going to live simple and humble because I don't want to let it go to my head, which is reasonable. I mean, we got a lot of excess nowadays.
Yeah.
But speaking of coaches, the NFL has so you have your head coach, then you have, for each team you have a coach. So that's already 4. So you got your head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, and special teams coach, right? And underneath,
and then kick return.
Special teams is the kick return. Yeah.
Okay,
and then
cool.
each group of coaches have a unit coach that sits under for each position group underneath that. So you have defensive line, offensive line, wide receivers, tight ends coach, running backs coach, linebackers, defensive backs, I think, is one group. Then there's the special teams coaches, which I think are somewhere along the lines of the kicking coaches and punting coaches. I think they're the same person, and maybe that's where they make a few sacrifices and say, "Well, we have enough."
Well, we're already at 12,
so it's almost a rugby pitch. We could field a reasonable team. Yeah, and some the best is, and some have assistant head coaches, which are not associated to any particular position. They just float around.
They're just assistant to them. They're just like, I just need someone to go tell the other person to do this.
And surprisingly, they're probably, like, coaches in the NFL are most overworked individuals. Like, they work like during season, like 16-hour days. It's crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I don't think you can underestimate like the life of a coach, because you have to be there hours before the players get there to set up, to plan. You train, you there when the players are there, and then you're probably there packing up and making a plan for the next day after the players leave, and then you go home, and then you come back and do it all over again.
Yeah, pretty much. Actually, there's a famous quote by Tony Dungy, who's the Super Bowl winning coach for the Indianapolis Colts, my favorite team. He said that when he was coaching, one of the most common statements coaches made were, to win a Super Bowl, you have to forego everything. You got to forego family. You got to forego your health. You just have to live and breathe to win that Super Bowl. Because if you like put in perspective, it's 1 in 32. It's extremely difficult thing to do, especially considering we don't have the sort of EPL situation where you can buy your way to winning a cup, right?
Yeah.
In the NFL, because of the salary cap, you have to have the right players at the right time with the right coaches. And it all makes it hugely difficult. So he said that after he had won, he said that proves that you can have a life outside. You can still go home to your kids. And I think it sort of speaks to the culture that's there as well. It's very hard grained that, this is what we expect and this is what needs to be delivered. And
I think that's probably also a reflection of the American work culture.
Oh yeah, I think so too.
I
mean, there is aspects to the American work culture that's very handshake agreement, which comes into why there's probably not as many minority coaches in the NFL, which is a big thing at the moment because it's a class action lawsuit. There is a rule called the Rooney Rule, which requires each organization, when they're going through the hiring process, to make sure that they interview legitimately minority candidates. So I think there's a minimum number. I think there's 1 or 2 it needs to be for each hiring cycle. But putting that aside, there's also this conflict of, well, majority of the players are minority, as in they're African American or they're Hispanic. And, well, if they're majority of the players, you would presume that they would make up majority of the coaching, but it's never been the case. The argument is that typically if you're a Caucasian athlete, you don't have a chance to enter the league because there is a talent gap. And because there is a talent gap, you go into coaching and therefore you have a head start on these guys who spend 3 or 4 years in the league. You can make that argument, certainly, but there's also the fact that majority of the owners are, Caucasian, white, billionaires.
Yep.
And, like in any business, you hire the people that you know and trust, the people who unfortunately look like you, which is a bit of a problem.
Yeah. Or you feel more comfortable, even if you don't know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Without casting aspersions.
And that does create that interesting question because, I think pretty much I think most coaches now are ex-players, and I'm not 100% on the NFL, but you see a lot of pathways for players to turn into coaches, especially now more so than ever in cricket as well, football, pretty much most other sports. There's the older coaches have some history, not so much in rugby. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Union,
not so much. In league, if we think about who's coaching right now in league, there is a few. There is a few. It's arguable that they're successful. Like if you look at like the Trent Robinsons of the world, there's probably more of those kinds of players who play for a couple of years and then move on. They're not like these. Like I wouldn't expect, for instance, Sean Johnson to be a coach. do you know what I mean? There's different tiers of players that end up as a coach, and I don't think it's the same across the board. I think it's also
that's what's going to make this year's State of Origin really interesting because Billy Slater is coaching the Queensland.
He did last year as well. Yeah.
And see how he goes.
So it is, and he won last year. But I mean, Freddie Fittler was a fantastic player. He's a Hall of Fame, rugby league Hall of Famer. So he's a pretty well established player. And
it's Ricky Stewart, Kevin Walters. Yeah. They're both coaching. They haven't really won titles or anything else like that.
Ricky Stewart's actually won a title. He won a title for the Roosters, surprisingly.
Oh, that was a long time
a
ago.
long time ago.
Jeez, how long has Ricky Stewart been?
Ricky Stewart basically
that was
retired and then immediately started coaching.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Makes sense.
And like Desi Hasler, he's got a title or 2 titles, I can't remember, with Manly, and he went to 1 title with the Doggies.
Yeah, with the Doggies, right? Yeah.
Gus Gould was an ex-player. I don't think he was as good as any of the players that we're talking about.
Well, let's the top of the charts is Ivan Cleary.
Yeah, he was an ex-player,
obviously, an ex-Warrior as well.
Yeah. Did he? He's
top. He was one of the top players for the Warriors as well,
which is unfortunate because I feel like if I was a Warriors fan, the biggest regret of my last 20 years is the fact that Ivan Cleary was let go.
Kevin, don't start. Like, honestly, I've just been watching it for so long. I think even when it happened, it was like, why is our grand final coach leaving? And he came out in a press conference, said, I am leaving. I don't want to go. And we were all like, yeah, he took us to grand final. Why is he leaving? Like, we don't want him to go. No one wants him to leave.
He was okay. To put it in context, he was let go before he made the grand final, right? I think
I know, but he was sitting there in the grand final.
It's nuts. Like I mean, we're in the same we're in the same boat. We're basically cousins in the rugby league, saying we're gonna suffer the same, and we have been suffering the same for a very long time.
Not this year, Kevin.
Your optimism.
This year it's all fixed now. It's all resolved. We have signed all the right players. We've let go of all the bad ones. It's all full guns ahead for this year.
The amount of times in my life that a Warriors fan has said that to me, I would be retired.
I just want to say it once and it'd be true. Like, it would just feel really good. But yes, power of coaching, right? Like, and that can really turn the team around. Like, Ivan Cleary did that, and then after he left, it was just kind of, it took away some of the culture, it took away some of those practices. We're seeing other teams benefit from changes in coaches. We're seeing Arsenal benefit from not changing their coach because Arteta's bought some consistency and, bought that over time. Like, he's honed, almost given time to hone his skill. Klopp potentially ran out of ideas. He's been maybe at Liverpool too long. Maybe he needs new support coaches to change, bring him some new ideas, and maybe refresh his style or refresh the players in the way they're training. Pep, I don't know. Maybe he probably doesn't need to change anything. He just needs to not play with a striker anymore, and he'll start winning every single game again.
And just pray to God that the club officials don't screw him over with financial fair play and things like that. Speaking of which, there is a world in which Jose Mourinho could still be the Manchester United coach after winning a title.
And there's also a world where Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is a Premier League winning coach.
Yeah,
with Manchester United. And that would have been
which makes me feel better about the last 10 years. The fact that I can say at some level, it doesn't have to be true, but the fact that now I can say to a Man City supporter, yeah, you cheated. We should have had 2 titles. Yeah. It makes me feel better about myself.
The only thing that takes away from that is that United having 2 titles actually gives Liverpool 3 titles, and then that brings them level on titles with Manchester United. So there's a double-edged sword there.
Yeah. What do I hate more?
Would I rather us not win or just Liverpool not?
I don't know.
Liverpool not win.
I don't know. That's a very good question. We should do a fan poll to see. Like, what would we prefer, Liverpool losing or Manchester United winning? No, but there's a caveat there. Manchester United winning over Man City. I don't know which one's, like, if it's just winning, then I'm not sure.
Yeah, so it's not just Man United winning, but if you give Man United 2 titles, you have to give Liverpool 3 titles. And that would take, so currently Liverpool have 19.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Man United have 20. So if Man United get 2 and Liverpool get 3, then they're tied on titles.
Yeah, I think that might be a bridge too far. I think that's probably my limit. I don't think, like, I know there is part of me that sort of goes, we'll probably never ever have that run that we did with Alex Ferguson ever again. Like, we were too blessed. Like, everything happened perfectly. We got blessed by the gods for a solid, I want to say like 15 years or something like that.
To have that team and the consistency.
Yeah. And then I think we're just never going to ever get that back again. We would at the same level.
I don't think Alex Ferguson could redo it again. Like, that was just that kind of period that I don't think it's feasible. I just don't think it's possible in modern football. Like, it just isn't. Too many variables, too many, competing responsibilities there's too much on, and there'd be too much competition as well. Like, it's just, you get just swiped by a rich investor, which happened once or twice to Alex Ferguson as well, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what happened with Blackburn, and with Chelsea. Jose Mourinho stepped in, and just Chelsea went out and bought a whole bunch of players, and they put together a good team, and they won the title.
Yeah, it feels exactly like what's happening right now. Chelsea have just gone and bought a whole bunch of players, and next year they'll probably win a title with Potter. Maybe the FA Cup, but it's a title. Yeah, it's interesting to think about the coaches from the perspective of who would actually coming back to the Lampard and Gerrard conversation, what sort of players actually make good coaches. Just from the tactical standpoint, I feel like with exceptions, that some players who would play typically in that front forward position, like an Erling Haaland, for instance, who are physically gifted, would not be a good coach. It's the same thing with Cristiano Ronaldo. I don't think he has it's
the ego.
Yeah, they put in the ego is a big part, but his game is not replicable, right? So
yeah,
and you can tell by how he treats his teammates that it's not he's not. I've never really thought that Cristiano made his teammates better. He was peak. He was the best thing.
He made his team better because he just
did everything exactly right. But he never made the players around it. Like Luka Modric is a great example of a player who makes everybody around him a little bit better. And I think Messi's probably in the last World Cup. I can say that he's managed to attain some of that.
I think one player who's obviously been really understated in terms of that was Wayne Rooney, and he sacrificed himself for the team consistently. Like, he'd be the one, instead of being up front scoring goals, he'd just be running around all over the pitch, making tackles and tracking runners to, basically be like, it's okay, Ronaldo, you stay up, you score all the goals, we'll win as a team. Then after Ronaldo left, Rooney became the main man, and he scored a ton of goals. And then Fergie went, we're gonna get Berbatov, and then we're gonna get Van Persie. And Rooney's like, all right, I'll just drop a little bit deeper so that Van Persie can score a ton of goals. And that's exactly what happened. And he just goes around just filling gaps in the team and, helping his team play better overall.
Yeah. And maybe Rooney will end up being a good coach because of that.
I was actually going to say the players that turn out to be good coaches are probably ones that are on the bench a lot or just spend a lot of time injured. because all they can do is sit there and watch their teammates train and watch the coaches explain to their teammates what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thought. So the players who are injured have a bit of unfulfillment when it comes to their footballing career, and maybe that's what drives them to become great coaches. So that would make a lot of sense from the psychological standpoint. Like it makes logical sense that people would think in that manner that, what's the saying? Those who can't do teach, those who can't teach teach PE.
Then what bracket does Zizou fall into? Like Zinedine Zidane, is it just basically from the World Cup final, he just has unresolved memories that he's trying to fix. So he just keeps turning up for Real Madrid and winning a Champions League title?
I think Zizou probably when he headbutted that other player, I can't remember what his name was. Materazzi. Yeah. Materazzi. In that World Cup, it shook something loose and it triggered certain aspects of his brain, and now he's transformed that into his new path, I guess.
That's awesome. And, I guess, we say some coaches have had transformative impacts on players. Some coaches have completely opposite. Jose Mourinho, classic example, has done both to the same group of players.
He's he's the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde of coaches.
Yeah.
One side he's fantastic. He's like, uplifts you, all that kind of stuff, and then he just destroys you when you get even slightly too overconfident, which is not such a bad thing. I think you just got to pare it down, little bits maybe. That wildly inconsistent EQ. I guess.
So speaking of Jose Mourinho, I think it's time we called it a night too. And that's all from us tonight. This has been the Back Pass Valentine's Day edition of just Ali and Kevin talking about coaching and in a whole bunch of range of sports, and just discussing what it's been like witnessing some of the different coaching aspects and some of the interesting coaching bits going around the world. Thank you for joining us. If you want to get sports nerdy with us, hit us up on our socials, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, at the Back Pass Pod. Thanks for listening. See you next week.